The sweet fading notes of a jazz quartet drifted through Le Ciel, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. Maylin moved between tables with practiced grace, balancing plates of artfully arranged food that cost more than she made in a day. At 24, she had the kind of easy smile that made wealthy patrons feel attended to without being bothered, a skill as valuable as knowing which fork went where. "Is everything to your liking?" she asked an older couple celebrating their anniversary, her voice soft but clear above the gentle music. The woman nodded, diamond earrings catching the light. "Wonderful as always, dear." May's gaze drifted momentarily toward the grand piano in the corner of the dining room. It was a Steinway, perfectly maintained, its polished black surface reflecting the crystal chandeliers overhead. The restaurant hired pianists on weekends, but tonight, a Tuesday, it sat empty, waiting. Like May's fingers had been waiting for 6 years. She pulled her attention back to her work, moving on to the next table where a group of finance executives were laughing too loudly. One of them nearly knocked over his wine glass as he gestured dramatically, and May steadied it without drawing attention to his mistake. He never noticed, but the woman beside him did, giving May a grateful look. "Another round?" May asked. "God, yes," said the loudest man. "And tell Victor the duck is still the best in the city." May nodded and headed back toward the kitchen, passing Danielle, another server who was carrying a tray of desserts. "Table 9 is yours, right?" Danielle whispered. "The guy with the red tie just asked for you specifically. 3rd time this month," May sighed. "I'll handle it." The kitchen was a controlled storm of activity, hot and loud and bright after the dim elegance of the dining room. Head chef Raphael barked orders in a mix of English, French, and Spanish while line cooks moved with military precision. May placed her order and leaned against the wall for a moment, rubbing her lower back. "You look dead on your feet," said Raphael during a rare quiet moment, his accent thick but warm. "Long day?" "Double shift," May replied. "Morning class, then straight here." What she didn't mention was how she'd spent the hour between her art history lecture and her shift. The university's music building had practice rooms in the basement. If you knew which door had a broken lock, you could slip in without being a music student. For 58 minutes she'd lost herself in Debussy, fingers remembering what her mind tried to forget. "You young people, always hustling." Raphael shook his head. "In my country, we work to live. Here, you live to work." May smiled but didn't answer. The truth was more complicated than that. The rest of her shift passed in the familiar rhythm of service, the careful attention to details, the mental juggling of orders and preferences, the invisible timing that made everything appear effortless. By 11, the last guests were finishing their coffee and settling bills. By midnight, the kitchen staff had cleaned up and left through the back door, calling goodbyes and making plans for late drinks somewhere cheaper. "You need a ride?" asked Danielle, pulling on her coat. "My boyfriend's picking me up." "I'm good," May said. "I've got some side work to finish. I'll catch the subway. Your choice. Don't stay too late, Victor's in one of his moods." After Danielle left, a heavy quiet settled over the restaurant. The bartender had cashed out and gone, leaving just May and the night cleaner who was busy in the bathrooms. Victor, the owner, was somewhere in his office upstairs, but he rarely came down after closing. May moved around the dining room, straightening chairs and replacing candles for tomorrow. Her feet ached in the regulation black shoes, and she could feel a blister forming on her left heel. The week's tips had been good, though. Good enough to cover this month's rent without dipping into her savings again. When she finished her tasks, she stood for a moment in the empty restaurant. The wall of windows looked out over the glittering city, a view that added $100 to each bill. But it wasn't the view that made her linger. It was the piano. In the silence, it seemed to watch her, patient and knowing. 6 years since she'd walked away from Juilliard and the crushing weight of expectations. 6 years of pretending that music was just something she used to do, like swimming or drawing, a hobby she'd outgrown. May glanced at her watch. Almost 1 in the morning. The night cleaner was still running the vacuum upstairs. Victor would be buried in paperwork or maybe already gone. She moved toward the piano before she could talk herself out of it. Just one piece, she promised herself. Just to feel the keys again on a real instrument, not the electronic keyboard with its headphones in her tiny apartment. May sat on the bench, adjusting it slightly. She ran her fingers over the keys without pressing down, feeling their cool smoothness. Then, almost without conscious thought, she began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the empty restaurant. She'd played it so many times that the music lived in her hands, in her bones. The gentle, flowing melody rose and fell like breathing, each note connecting to the next in an unbroken line. May closed her eyes. She didn't need to see the keys. Her world narrowed to the points where her fingers met the piano, to the way the sound wrapped around her like an old friend's embrace. Here, in this moment, there were no rent checks or student loans, no disappointed professors or parents, no panic attacks before recitals that had eventually crushed her dreams. There was only the music, pure and perfect. As the piece progressed, she leaned into the emotional core of it. The middle section grew more intense, her left hand providing a steady rhythm while her right hand carried the increasingly complex melody. She played with the timing slightly, not showing off but responding to how the music made her feel tonight. In this space, on this particular piano, she'd forgotten how it felt to play on an instrument of this quality. Her fingers coaxed warmth and depth from the Steinway that her apartment keyboard could never produce. Each note had character, personality. The piano responded to her touch like a living thing. The piece returned to its main theme, and May let the final section breathe, slowing almost imperceptibly as the notes climbed higher, becoming more delicate. The last few measures felt like a gentle question left hanging in the air, unresolved even after the final note faded. For a long moment, May sat motionless, hands still poised above the keys. The silence that followed felt sacred somehow, and she was reluctant to break it. A sound from the darkness startled her, the soft clearing of a throat. May's eyes flew open, heart suddenly pounding. She stood up so quickly that the bench scraped loudly against the floor. "I'm sorry," she said automatically, peering into the shadows near the bar. "I didn't think anyone was still here." A figure stepped forward into the dim light. Victor Harmon, the restaurant's owner. He was in his early 60s, tall and lean, with silver hair and the kind of posture that spoke of old-world manners. His expression was unreadable. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the empty space. "I was working late and heard the music." May felt her face growing hot. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harmon, I know I shouldn't have." He held up a hand, stopping her. "How long have you worked here, May?" "Almost 2 years, sir." 2 years, he repeated slowly. "And in all that time, I never knew I had a concert pianist serving truffled pasta." May looked down at her hands, suddenly aware of how they were trembling. "I'm not a concert pianist." That performance suggests otherwise. She shook her head. "I just used to play, a long time ago." Victor moved closer, studying her with the intensity he usually reserved for wine lists and balance sheets. "Used to play where?" That wasn't someone who used to play at church socials. The question hung between them. May considered lying, saying she'd taken lessons as a kid. But something in his face, a genuine curiosity rather than anger at her unauthorized use of the piano, made her answer truthfully. "Juilliard," she said quietly. "For a year and a half, I dropped out." His eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of his surprise. "I see." May reached for her bag, desperate to escape this conversation. "I should go." "The subway, why did you leave?" Victor asked, not unkindly. The question hit her like a physical blow. No one had asked her that directly before. People usually avoided the subject once they learned she'd walked away from one of the world's most prestigious music programs. "It wasn't right for me," she said, the practiced answer sounding hollow even to her own ears. Victor didn't respond immediately. He moved to the piano and ran his hand lightly over its surface, a gesture that seemed almost affectionate. "Do you know why we have this particular piano?" he asked. May shook her head. "It belonged to my wife," he said. "Alexandra was a pianist too. Not professionally, she was a surgeon, but music was her other love." His voice softened. "She died 5 years ago. Cancer. I couldn't bear to have the piano in our apartment afterward, but I couldn't sell it either." "I'm sorry," May said, meaning it. Victor nodded. "She would have loved your playing. You have something special, May. Something that can't be taught." May felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "Thank you, but tonight is late and you need to catch your train," he finished for her. "Go, we'll talk another time." May hesitated, then nodded. As she headed toward the door, he called after her. "May?" She turned. "The piano isn't off limits. Not to someone who plays like that." She managed a small smile and slipped out into the night, the ghost of Chopin's nocturne still echoing in her mind. May couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her small apartment staring at the ceiling as car lights occasionally swept across it. The memory of Victor's face when he'd heard her playing kept replaying in her mind. Not anger or annoyance, but something else entirely. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Her alarm beeped at 6, though she'd barely slept. Morning shifts at Le Ciel were easier in some ways, the breakfast crowd less demanding than dinner guests. But they started painfully early. She splashed cold water on her face, pulled her hair into a neat bun, and headed out into the gray morning light. The restaurant was quiet when she arrived, just the kitchen staff prepping for the day and the morning manager checking deliveries. May tied her apron and began setting tables, the familiar routine calming her nerves. Maybe Victor wouldn't even mention last night. Maybe he'd forgotten about it already. At precisely 7, the doors opened for the first customers, business people mostly, having power breakfasts before heading to their offices. May moved efficiently between tables, pouring coffee and taking orders with a warm smile that hid her exhaustion. "That gentleman at table 5 is asking for you specifically," said Hector, the morning manager, around 9. "Says he has a message." May's stomach tightened as she spotted Victor sitting alone by the window reading a newspaper. She hadn't expected him to be here this early. Taking a deep breath, she approached his table. "Good morning, Mr. Harmon. Can I get you something?" He looked up and folded his newspaper neatly. "Good morning, May. Just coffee, thank you." She poured him a cup, trying to keep her hand steady. "Will there be anything else?" "Yes," he said. "I'd like you to sit down for a moment." May glanced around nervously. "Sir, I'm on shift. Hector knows I need to speak with you." "Just for 5 minutes." Reluctantly, May slid into the chair across from him. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, making the dining room look different than it did during evening service. Brighter, less formal. Victor stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about your playing last night." "I'm sorry about that, Mr. Harmon. It won't happen again." "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about," he said, looking directly at her. "I want it to happen again." May blinked, confused. "I don't understand." "You know, I wasn't always a restaurant owner," Victor said, changing direction suddenly. "Before this, I conducted the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra for 15 years. May's eyes widened. "You're Victor Harmon? The conductor?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "You've heard of me?" "Of course," May said. "We studied your recordings at Juilliard. Your interpretation of Mahler's Fifth is legendary." Now it was Victor's turn to look surprised. "Thank you. That means something, coming from someone who plays Chopin the way you do." May looked down at the table, uncomfortable with the praise. I was just playing around." "No," Victor said firmly. "That wasn't just playing around. I've heard countless pianists in my career, from students to world-class soloists. What you did last night was extraordinary. The question is, why are you serving breakfast instead of performing?" The direct question made May's chest tighten. She hadn't talked about this with anyone. Not her parents, not her friends from school, no one. "I couldn't do it," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "The pressure, the performances. I would get so nervous before recitals that I couldn't breathe. My hands would shake. Sometimes I'd blank on pieces I'd played 100 times. She swallowed hard. "During my sophomore year jury performance, I just froze, in front of the entire faculty. I walked off stage and never went back." Victor listened without interrupting, his eyes kind but analytical, like he was reading a complex score. "Stage fright," he said simply when she finished. May nodded, feeling both relieved and exposed. "I wasn't cut out for it." "That's not true," Victor said, surprising her with his certainty. "You have extraordinary talent. What you experienced is common, even among the greatest musicians." "Not like what happened to me," May insisted. "Some people just aren't meant to perform." Victor sat back in his chair, studying her face. "Did I ever tell you about my first performance with the Chicago Symphony?" May shook her head. "I was guest conducting. Big opportunity. Halfway through the first movement of Beethoven's Seventh, my mind went completely blank." He snapped his fingers. "Gone. I couldn't remember what came next, even though I'd been preparing for months." "What did you do?" May asked, drawn into the story despite herself. "I kept conducting," Victor said with a small smile. "The orchestra knew the piece. I followed them for about 30 seconds until my brain came back online. No one in the audience ever knew. That's different, May said. You recovered. Because I had tools, techniques, things I'd learned after experiencing similar panic early in my career. He leaned forward. These aren't mystical gifts that some musicians have and others don't. They're skills that can be developed. A family with young children was seated at a nearby table, momentarily distracting them both. May watched as the parents helped the little ones with their menus. I appreciate what you're trying to do, May said when she turned back, but I made my peace with this a long time ago. I still love music. I still play for myself. That's enough, is it? Victor asked quietly. Before she could answer, Hector appeared at the table. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a tour group coming in and Lisa called in sick. May stood up quickly. I should get back to work, Victor nodded. We'll talk more another time. As she turned to leave, he added, May, think about what I said, and remember, the piano isn't off limits. The morning rush kept May too busy to dwell on their conversation, but Victor's words stayed with her. By the time her shift ended at 3, she was both exhausted and oddly energized. Instead of heading straight home, she found herself walking to the nearby park, sitting on a bench by the fountain. Was it enough, playing only for herself? The rush she'd felt last night at the restaurant's piano had been different from playing her keyboard at home. There was something about making music in a space where it could breathe, even if no one was listening, or almost no one. May pulled out her phone and searched for Victor Harmon Conductor. Dozens of results appeared, concert reviews, interviews, recordings. She clicked on a video from 15 years ago. Victor conducting Mahler, his movements precise yet fluid, his face intense with concentration. The comments below were full of praise for his emotional depth and technical brilliance. What would it be like, she wondered, to be mentored by someone like that? To have someone believe in her talent that strongly? Dangerous thinking, she muttered to herself, putting her phone away. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. She'd built a new life for herself, stable, predictable, safe. Opening that door again would mean risking the same pain, the same crushing disappointment. But still, the next evening, May arrived for her dinner shift to find an envelope with her name on it in Victor's handwriting. Inside was a short note. Private event next Tuesday. Small gathering. Would you consider playing? Just one piece. Think about it. Her heart raced as she read it. Play for an audience? The very thought made her palms sweat. What's that? Asked Danielle, coming up beside her. May quickly tucked the note into her pocket. Nothing. Just a schedule change. Throughout her shift, the note seemed to burn in her pocket. Every time she passed the piano, she felt its pull, remembering how it felt beneath her fingers. By the end of the night, she'd decided to refuse Victor's offer. It was crazy to even consider it. Yet when she finished her side work, she found herself drawn once again to the piano. The restaurant was empty except for the night cleaner upstairs. Like the night before, she sat down on the bench and positioned her hands over the keys. This time, she played something different. Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. It was technically demanding, full of crashing chords and rapid passages that required precision and strength. May poured her conflicted feelings into the music, letting the powerful sections thunder through the empty restaurant. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice Victor until she'd finished the final resounding chord. He was standing in the same spot as the night before, but this time he was smiling. I suppose I'll take that as a yes, he said. May's hands fell to her lap. I can't play for people. Not anymore. Victor moved to sit on a nearby bar stool. You just did. That's different. I didn't know you were there until I finished. Exactly, he said, his eyes bright with something that looked like triumph. That's the key, May. When you're truly in the music, it doesn't matter who's listening. It's not that simple, she protested. No, it's not, he agreed. But it's a starting point. He regarded her thoughtfully. The event on Tuesday is just a small dinner party. 10 people, maybe 12. Close friends, most of them musicians themselves. That makes it worse, May said. They'll know every mistake. They'll appreciate genuine artistry, Victor corrected. And they'll understand better than anyone what it costs to share it. May stared at the keys, running her finger lightly over their smooth surface. Why is this so important to you? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Because talent like yours shouldn't be hidden, he said finally. Because music matters, and because I think you miss it more than you're willing to admit, even to yourself. The truth of his words hit her unexpectedly hard. She did miss it, the connection, the way music could express things that words never could. I'll think about it, she said softly. Victor nodded, seeming to understand that was all she could offer right now. That's all I'm asking. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. If you do decide to play, what would you choose? May didn't hesitate. Debussy. Claire de Lune. Perfect, Victor said with a warm smile. Simply perfect. Tuesday came too quickly. May spent the days leading up to it in a state of nervous anticipation, practicing Claire de Lune on her keyboard at home until her neighbors knocked on the wall. She hadn't officially agreed to play at Victor's dinner party yet, but her fingers seemed to have made the decision for her. She arrived at Le Ciel 2 hours early. Her concert clothes, a simple black dress she'd kept from her Juilliard days, packed in her bag. The restaurant was closed to the public for the private event, and the staff was busy transforming the space. White roses filled crystal vases on each table. Candles were being lit, casting a warm glow throughout the dining room. There you are, said Danielle, carrying a stack of special menus. Victor's been asking for you. May found him in the kitchen, deep in conversation with Chef Raphael about the evening's menu. He looked up when she entered, his face brightening. May. Good. I was beginning to worry you'd changed your mind. She twisted her hands together. I'm still not sure about this. Victor excused himself from Raphael and led May to a quiet corner of the kitchen. What's troubling you specifically? Everything, she admitted. Who will be there? What if I mess up? What if, one question at a time, Victor said gently. The guests are friends of mine from the music world. Isabella Chen will be there. Isabella Chen? May's eyes widened. The pianist? Victor nodded. Along with a few other musicians, a couple of patrons of the arts, and some old friends. That's worse than I thought, May said, her stomach nodding. Isabella Chen is a legend. I studied her recordings at school. She's also one of the kindest people I know, Victor said. Listen, May, these aren't critics coming to judge you. They're people who love music, gathering for good food and conversation. Your playing will be a gift to the evening, not a performance to be critiqued. May took a deep breath, trying to believe him. What time do you want me to play? After the main course, before dessert. Around 9. He studied her face. If you're truly uncomfortable, you don't have to do this. But I think you'll regret it if you don't try. Those words stayed with May as she changed into her server's uniform and helped with the final preparations. Would she regret not taking this chance? She'd spent 6 years avoiding performances of any kind. Maybe it was time to face that fear. At 7, the guests began to arrive. Victor greeted each one warmly at the door while May and Danielle served champagne. May couldn't help stealing glances at the group. Elegant, cultured people whose conversations flowed easily from music to art to travel. And there she was, Isabella Chen, petite and graceful in a deep blue dress, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a classic chignon. In her mid-60s now, she had been one of the most celebrated pianists of her generation, known for her interpretations of the French Impressionists. May had spent countless hours listening to her recordings, trying to capture some of her delicate touch, her sense of color and light. You look like you've seen a ghost, Danielle whispered as they carried trays back to the kitchen. That's Isabella Chen, May said under her breath. She's practically a god in the classical music world. Wait, are you playing tonight? Danielle asked, suddenly connecting the dots. Is that why Victor closed the restaurant? May nodded miserably. I think I'm going to be sick. Why didn't you tell me? Danielle looked hurt. I thought we were friends. We are, May said quickly. I wasn't sure I was actually going to do it. I still don't know if I can. Danielle's expression softened. Well, I think it's amazing. And now I get why Victor's been acting so weird lately. He's been planning this for you. The evening progressed smoothly as May and Danielle served the first courses. May moved through her familiar routines, finding comfort in the work as she tried not to think about what was coming. The conversation at the tables flowed freely, punctuated by laughter and the occasional burst of enthusiastic debate about some composer or performance. At one point, May was refilling water glasses when she heard Isabella Chen mention Debussy. His work requires such sensitivity, the pianist was saying. So many young players rushed through it, missing all the subtle colors. May's hand trembled slightly as she poured, and a few drops spilled onto the tablecloth. "I'm so sorry," she said, quickly blotting it with her napkin. Isabella looked up at her with kind eyes. "No harm done, dear." By 8:45, the main course had been served and enjoyed. May slipped away to the small staff room, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She changed into her black dress with shaking hands and tried to remember the breathing exercises her old teacher had taught her. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "It's just one piece. Just 5 minutes of your life." A soft knock at the door made her jump. "May?" It was Victor. "It's time." She opened the door, smoothing down her dress nervously. Victor looked at her with quiet approval. "You look like a concert pianist," he said. "I feel like I'm about to face a firing squad," she replied. He chuckled. "I've made some remarks to the group. They're looking forward to hearing you play. But remember, no expectations. Just share the music you love." May nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They walked together toward the dining room, where the guests had finished their main course and were enjoying a lull in the meal. The piano waited in its corner, lid raised, gleaming in the candlelight. Victor cleared his throat and the conversations quieted. "Friends, I've been holding back a surprise for this evening. Some of you know I've always had an eye or ear for exceptional talent. A few weeks ago I discovered that one of our staff here at Le Ciel is a remarkable pianist. She's agreed to play for us tonight, and I think you'll understand why I've been so excited once you hear her. Please welcome Maylene." There was warm applause as May made her way to the piano. Her legs felt wooden, her mouth dry. She sat down on the bench and adjusted it slightly, buying a few seconds to collect herself. From the corner of her eye, she could see Isabella Chen watching with interest. Victor had taken a seat at a nearby table, his expression encouraging. And there was Danielle, standing by the kitchen door, giving her a thumbs up. May placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes. The room around her faded as she took a deep breath. Then gently she began to play the opening notes of Clair de Lune. The familiar melody flowed from her fingers, delicate and dreamy. She tried to focus only on the music, on the way each note connected to the next, on the subtle shifts in harmony that made this piece so beloved. Her initial stiffness began to melt away as she lost herself in Debussy's sound world. The middle section opened up like a flower, growing slightly in volume and intensity. May leaned into the phrases, letting them breathe and swell naturally. She had played this piece hundreds of times, but tonight it felt new. Alive in a way it hadn't been when she practiced alone in her apartment. As she approached the return of the main theme, she felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but it had moved to the background. In the foreground was only the music, its beauty, its gentle power. She wasn't performing anymore. She was simply sharing something she loved deeply. The final section of the piece floated like moonlight on water, soft and luminous. May let the last chord linger, then slowly lifted her hands from the keys. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the room erupted in applause, enthusiastic, genuine applause. May opened her eyes, slightly dazed, to see the guests on their feet. Victor was beaming. Danielle was wiping a tear from her cheek, and Isabella Chen was making her way toward the piano. "My dear," the older pianist said, taking May's hands in hers. "That was exquisite. Such sensitivity, such color. Where did you study?" "Juilliard," May said, finding her voice. "But I left in my second year." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "That's a shame. You have a rare gift." Before May could respond, the other guests surrounded her, offering congratulations and questions. Who was her teacher? What other composers did she play? Would she perform again soon? The attention was overwhelming, but not in the way May had feared. There was no judgment in their questions, only genuine interest and appreciation. Victor appeared at her side with a glass of champagne. "I told you," he said quietly. "A gift, not a performance to be critiqued." May took the glass with a still trembling hand. "Thank you for pushing me to do this." As the evening continued, May found herself in conversation with Isabella Chen, who asked thoughtful questions about May's approach to Debussy. "You understand his language," Isabella said. "The spaces between the notes, the importance of silence. That can't be taught." "I learned so much from your recordings," May admitted. "Especially your Ravel album." Isabella seemed pleased. "Music is a conversation across time, isn't it? We learn from those who came before and pass it on to those who follow. She tilted her head, studying May with keen eyes. Why did you leave Juilliard, if you don't mind my asking? May hesitated, then decided on honesty. Stage fright. Debilitating stage fright. I couldn't handle the pressure. To her surprise, Isabella nodded with understanding. I suffered terribly from that in my early years. Nearly ended my career before it began. How did you overcome it? May asked, hardly daring to hope there might be an answer. I didn't, not completely, Isabella said with a wry smile, but I learned to live with it, to channel it. And I found a teacher who helped me develop techniques to manage it. She reached into her small evening bag and pulled out a card. If you're interested, I'd be happy to work with you. No pressure, no expectations. Just two pianists exploring music together. May stared at the card in disbelief. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Isabella replied gently. Talent like yours shouldn't remain hidden. The same words Victor had used, May realized. As if they could see something in her that she couldn't quite see in herself. A month passed and May's life took on a new rhythm. Twice a week, she visited Isabella Chen's Upper West Side apartment for piano lessons that weren't really lessons at all. Isabella called them musical conversations, and they often began with tea in her sunlit living room before moving to the two grand pianos that faced each other by the windows. You don't need technical instruction, Isabella had told her during their first session. What you need is to reconnect with why you play in the first place. Today, May arrived at Isabella's building clutching a folder of sheet music. The doorman greeted her by name now. Good afternoon, Miss Lynn, and the elevator operator smiled as he took her to the 12th floor. Isabella opened the door before May could knock, elegant as always in tailored pants and a silk blouse, her silver-streaked hair loose around her shoulders. Right on time, she said warmly. Come in. I've made a new tea I think you'll enjoy. White peony. May followed her into the apartment, still slightly awed by its casual luxury. Paintings by modern artists hung on the walls, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves were filled with scores and books on music. Large windows overlooked Central Park, now vibrant with spring colors. How was your week? Isabella asked as she poured steaming tea into delicate cups. Busy, May replied, settling into what had become her usual chair. I played at Le Ciel 3 times. After that first night at Victor's dinner party, word had spread quickly. Regular patrons began requesting piano music during their meals, and Victor had officially added May to the schedule as a pianist on certain evenings. She still worked as a server most nights, but increasingly the piano was becoming part of her identity at the restaurant. And the nerves? Isabella asked, watching her carefully. May considered the question. Better, not gone, but manageable. The breathing techniques help. And what you said about focusing on one person in the room? Isabella nodded approvingly. Good. And what are we exploring today? May opened her folder and pulled out the sheet music. I've been thinking about this Chopin nocturne. The one in B-flat minor. Ah, Isabella's eyes lit up. One of his most melancholy pieces. What draws you to it? They spent the next 2 hours at the pianos, playing sections back and forth, discussing interpretations, trying different approaches to the same passages. With Isabella, May felt none of the judgment or pressure she'd experienced at Juilliard. Instead, there was a sense of mutual exploration, of two artists sharing their love of the same music. As their session was ending, Isabella mentioned casually, I had lunch with Thomas Wang yesterday. May looked up, surprised. Thomas Wang was the director of the New York Symphony Orchestra, one of the most prestigious in the country. He mentioned they're in a difficult situation, Isabella continued, gathering the scattered sheet music. Their pianist for next month's gala concert has taken ill. Something serious, poor thing, and they're scrambling to find a replacement. May's heart began to beat faster. That's unfortunate, indeed. The program includes Ravel's Piano Concerto in G major. Not many pianists can step in on short notice for that one. Isabella glanced at May with a small smile. I might have mentioned that I know someone who plays it beautifully. Isabella, May said, her voice tight. You didn't. I simply suggested he might want to hear you play. Isabella held up a hand as May began to protest. No pressure, just an opportunity. He'll be at Le Ciel tomorrow evening to listen. Tomorrow? May felt the room tilt slightly. A symphony concert is completely different from playing background music in a restaurant. Isabella put a gentle hand on her arm. He's not offering you the concert. He just wants to hear you play. One step at a time, remember? On the subway ride home, May's thoughts raced. Playing at Le Ciel had been one thing. The diners were focused on their food and conversations, not analyzing her every note. But to play for the director of the New York Symphony? And to potentially perform with an orchestra? The very idea made her palms sweat. She got off at her stop and walked quickly to her apartment building, needing the comfort of her own space. Inside her small studio, she sat at her keyboard and stared at the keys without playing. What would her parents think if they knew about these new developments? They had been so proud when she was accepted to Juilliard, so confused and disappointed when she left. They had eventually accepted her decision, but their calls still contained careful questions about whether she was still enjoying her little restaurant job. May reached for her phone and pulled up a number she rarely called anymore. After 3 rings, her mother answered. "May, is everything okay?" The immediate concern in her voice made May wince with guilt. "Everything's fine, Mom. I just wanted to talk, of course. Your father is here too. Let me put you on speaker." May took a deep breath. "I've been playing again. The piano." There was a moment of silence, then her father's voice. "Playing where?" "At the restaurant where I work, and I've been taking lessons, sort of, with Isabella Chen." Another silence, longer this time. Then her mother, voice careful. "The concert pianist?" "Yes, she's been helping me with technique and with the anxiety." "May," her father said, his voice gentler than she remembered. "This is wonderful news." "There's more," May said, surprising herself. "The director of the New York Symphony is coming to hear me play tomorrow. One of their soloists is sick and they need a replacement." Her mother gasped. "Oh, May." "It's just to listen," May added quickly. "It probably won't lead to anything." "But it might," her father said. "And that's something, isn't it?" "Would you—" May hesitated. "Would you want to come? Tomorrow night?" "Yes," they answered in unison, making May smile despite her nerves. "I'll reserve a table for you." 8 o'clock. After hanging up, May felt lighter somehow. Whatever happened tomorrow, having her parents there would be both terrifying and comforting. The next evening arrived with alarming speed. May spent the day alternating between practicing the Ravel piece and trying to distract herself with household chores. By the time she arrived at Le Ciel, her stomach was in knots. Victor met her at the staff entrance, looking unusually formal in a dark suit. "Big night," he said, his eyes twinkling. Wang called to confirm his reservation. "Table near the piano, of course." "Please don't make a big deal about this," May begged. "I just want it to be a normal evening." "Of course," Victor agreed. "Though I did adjust the schedule so you're only playing tonight, not serving." May gave him a grateful look. "My parents are coming too. I haven't seen them in a while." Victor squeezed her shoulder. "I'll make sure they have the best table in the house." The restaurant filled quickly that evening. May, dressed in the simple black dress that had become her performance attire, tried to stay hidden in the kitchen until it was time to play. Chef Raphael handed her a glass of water and a reassuring smile, but didn't pressure her with conversation. At precisely 8, Victor appeared. "Your parents are here." And Wang just arrived. May peeked through the kitchen door. Her parents were being seated at a prime table, her mother elegant in a blue dress May hadn't seen before, her father looking distinguished and slightly uncomfortable in a tie. 3 tables away sat a man May recognized from photos, Thomas Wang, legendary director of the New York Symphony. "Ready?" Victor asked softly. May nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She followed him into the dining room where the gentle buzz of conversation and the clink of cutlery created a familiar backdrop. The piano waited, its lid raised, the keys gleaming under the soft lighting. As she crossed to the instrument, she caught her mother's eye. The pride and anxiety mingled in her expression nearly undid May's composure. She gave a small nod of acknowledgement, then sat at the piano, adjusting the bench slightly. For a moment, she simply breathed, using the techniques Isabella had taught her. She was aware of Wang watching her, of her parents holding hands at their table, of Victor standing near the bar with an encouraging smile. Then she began to play. She started not with Ravel, but with a piece she knew intimately, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the same one Victor had first heard her play. Her fingers found the keys with practiced ease, and the melody rose into the room, gentle yet clear above the ambient noise. As she played, a hush fell over the nearest tables. Diners paused in their conversations, wine glasses hovering midway to lips as the music drew their attention. May kept her focus on the keys, on the shape of each phrase, on the subtle dynamics that gave the piece its emotional power. When she finished the Chopin, there was a moment of stillness before applause broke out, not just from her parents and Victor, but from the surrounding tables as well. May acknowledged it with a small nod, then, without pausing for too long, moved directly into the Ravel concerto. This was a different sort of piece entirely, bright, jazzy with French and Spanish influences. The opening movement sparkled with energy, demanding both technical precision and playful expression. May lost herself in its complexity, in the joy of the music itself. When she reached the beautiful second movement, with its long, flowing melody over a steady waltz rhythm, she dared to glance up. Her mother was wiping a tear from her cheek. Her father sat completely still, his attention fixed on her with an intensity she hadn't seen since childhood. And Wang. Wang was leaning forward in his chair, his dinner forgotten, his eyes narrowed in concentration. May returned her focus to the music, to the delicate interplay between melody and harmony. In a concert hall, this movement would be accompanied by a soft cushion of strings with a single poignant flute echoing the piano's theme. Even without the orchestra, she tried to suggest those missing voices through her playing. The final movement erupted with renewed energy, a whirlwind of notes that required every bit of technique she possessed. May's fingers flew over the keys, bringing the piece to its jubilant conclusion. This time, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Several patrons stood, including Wang, who was actually smiling, a rare sight according to industry rumors. May's parents were on their feet, her mother openly crying now, her father clapping with uncharacteristic abandon. Victor appeared at the piano, beaming. "I think you've made some fans," he said quietly. "Wang wants to speak with you when you're ready." May nodded, suddenly exhausted but exhilarated. "I should see my parents first." She made her way to their table, where her mother immediately enveloped her in a tight hug. "My little girl," she whispered. "You were magnificent." Her father, never demonstrative, surprised her by hugging her next. "We are so proud of you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "So very proud." Before they could say more, Wang approached the table. In person, he was less intimidating than his reputation suggested, a compact man with intelligent eyes and a direct manner. "Miss Lin," he said, extending his hand. That was quite impressive, particularly the Ravel. "Thank you," May managed, shaking his hand. "I'd like to discuss something with you," he continued. "Perhaps you could come to my office tomorrow?" 2:00? May glanced at her parents, then back to Wang. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I'd be happy to." As Wang walked away, Victor appeared with champagne for the table. "I think this calls for a celebration," he said, pouring 3 glasses. May's father raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said. May lifted her own glass, meeting their eyes. "And to taking chances," she added. The crystal clinked together, bright and clear like the high notes of a piano. The offices of the New York Symphony were housed in a sleek glass building near Lincoln Center. May stood outside, gazing up at the countless windows reflecting the afternoon sky, trying to calm her racing heart. She wore her best outfit, a navy blue suit she had splurged on last year for job interviews, and carried a portfolio with her music scores, though Wang hadn't specifically asked her to bring anything. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, repeating the mantra Isabella had taught her. Then she took a deep breath and walked through the revolving doors. The receptionist directed her to the 11th floor. When the elevator doors opened, May found herself in a bright open space with framed concert posters lining the walls, visual reminders of the symphony's illustrious history. A young woman with a clipboard approached her. "Miss Lin, Mr. Wang is ready for you. Please follow me." She led May down a corridor to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Wang rose from behind his desk as she entered, his manner brisk but not unfriendly. "Miss Lin, thank you for coming." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit." May perched on the edge of the seat, her portfolio clutched tightly in her lap. "Thank you for inviting me." Wang studied her for a moment. "Your playing last night was remarkable. Isabella Chen spoke highly of you, but I've learned to form my own opinions." A small smile softened his face. In this case, she was right. Thank you, May said again, not knowing what else to say. I'll get straight to the point, Wang continued. As you know, we've lost our soloist for the Spring Gala concert. It's our most important fundraising event of the year, with our major donors and board members in attendance. He leaned forward. I'd like you to consider stepping in. Though she'd known this might be coming, hearing the actual offer made May's breath catch. Mr. Wang, I'm not a professional pianist. I haven't performed with an orchestra since your time at Juilliard, he finished for her. Yes, I know. I made some calls this morning. Of course he had. May felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment, imagining what her former professors might have said about her abrupt departure. I spoke with Professor Abramson, Wang said, mentioning her primary teacher from those days. She remembered you quite clearly. Said you were one of the most naturally gifted students she'd ever taught. May looked down at her hands. I had some difficulties with performance anxiety, so I gathered. Wang's voice was matter-of-fact, not judgmental. It's not uncommon, you know. Some of our greatest soloists have struggled with it. He paused. Isabella tells me you've been working on techniques to manage it. May nodded. It's better now. Playing at Le Ciel has helped. But a concert hall is different. Indeed it is, Wang agreed. More pressure, larger audience, but also better acoustics and an orchestra to support you. He smiled slightly. And I'm a good conductor. I won't let you get lost. Despite her nerves, May found herself smiling back. The Ravel Concerto? Yes, you play it beautifully and it's already programmed. We have 3 weeks until the gala. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Here's the score, though it seems you hardly need it. And here's our rehearsal schedule. May took the folder automatically, still not quite believing this was happening. Mr. Wang, I'm honored, but I need to think about this. He nodded, unsurprised. Of course. It's a big step. Talk to Isabella. Sleep on it, but I'll need your decision by Friday. As May left the building, her mind was spinning. She pulled out her phone and texted Isabella. He offered me the gala concert. 3 weeks from now, the Ravel. The response came almost immediately. Say yes. May smiled and tucked her phone away. She wasn't ready to decide yet. There was someone else she needed to talk to first. Le Ciel was just opening for dinner service when she arrived. Victor was at the host stand, reviewing the reservation list with Hector. He looked up as she entered, raising an eyebrow in question. Can we talk? May asked. They sat at a corner table away from the staff's curious glances. May told him about the meeting with Wang, about the offer to perform at the gala. That's extraordinary, Victor said when she finished, though not surprising. You're an exceptional pianist, May. I'm terrified, she admitted. What if I freeze again? What if I can't handle it? Victor considered her for a long moment. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone here? When May nodded, he continued. The reason I left conducting wasn't just to open this restaurant. I was starting to experience panic attacks before performances. Nothing as severe as what you described, but enough to make me question whether I could continue. What would you have done? May asked quietly. If someone had offered you a way back, a chance to try again? I would have taken it, Victor said without hesitation. In fact, that's what I'm doing now in a small way. Bringing music into this space, nurturing talents like yours. It's my way back. He leaned forward. The question is, what do you want, May? Not what you think you can handle or what others expect. What do you want? The answer came to her with surprising clarity. I want to play. I want to make music that moves people. I just don't want to be crushed by it again. Victor nodded, understanding. Then say yes, and know that whatever happens, you'll still have a place here. The piano will be waiting. On Friday, May called Wang and accepted the offer. What followed were 3 of the most intense weeks of her life. She reduced her shifts at Le Ciel to focus on practicing. Isabella worked with her daily, refining passages, discussing interpretation, and most importantly, continuing to strengthen her mental approach to performance. The anxiety doesn't go away, Isabella told her during one session. You just learn to make it work for you instead of against you. That edge of adrenaline, it can sharpen your playing, make it more alive. Rehearsals with the orchestra began 10 days before the concert. The first time May played with them, she was so nervous she missed her entrance. Wang simply nodded to her and had the orchestra start again. The second attempt went better, and by the third, She began to feel the exhilaration of being surrounded by so much sound, all those instruments responding to her piano and to Wang's precise direction. The days flew by in a blur of practice, rehearsals, and fitful sleep. Before she knew it, it was the night of the gala. Lincoln Center glowed against the evening sky as limousines and taxis delivered patrons in formal attire. Inside, the concert hall hummed with anticipation. Backstage, May paced in a small practice room, running through the breathing exercises Isabella had taught her. There was a knock at the door, and Victor entered, elegant in a tuxedo. "Just wanted to wish you luck," he said. "Though you don't need it." Behind him appeared Danielle, dressed for serving at the post-concert reception. "We're all rooting for you," she said with a grin. "The whole staff is coming to the second balcony after their shifts." Then her parents arrived, her mother teary-eyed with pride, her father carrying a small box. "This was your grandmother's," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate jade pendant on a silver chain. "She would want you to have it tonight." As her mother fastened it around her neck, Isabella appeared in the doorway. "It's time," she said gently. May hugged her supporters one by one, then followed Isabella toward the stage. They stopped just out of sight of the audience. "Remember," Isabella said, "they're here to be moved, not to judge. Share the music. That's all you need to do." May nodded, focusing on her breathing, on the weight of her grandmother's pendant against her skin. Then the stagehand gestured and she walked out onto the vast stage. The lights were blinding at first. The concert hall was much larger than she remembered from her student days, rising up in tiers filled with faces she couldn't distinguish. She made her way to the gleaming concert grand at center stage and bowed to the audience, then to the orchestra. Wang entered to enthusiastic applause, shook her hand, and took his place at the podium. He met her eyes with a reassuring nod, then turned to the orchestra and raised his baton. The opening orchestral section of the Ravel Concerto began, bright, jazzy, bursting with energy. May watched Wang's precise movements, feeling the music build around her. When her moment came to join, her hands found the keys with confidence born of countless hours of practice. The first movement flew by in a blur of notes and interplay between piano and orchestra. May was intensely focused, yet somehow outside herself, aware of the music as a living thing they were all creating together. The anxiety was there, but it had transformed into energy, into heightened awareness. As the second movement began, with its achingly beautiful melody floating over gentle accompaniment, May felt something open inside her. This was why she played for moments like this, when the music spoke directly to the heart. She could feel the audience's attention, almost hear their collective breath as the movement reached its tender conclusion. Then it was time for the final movement. A whirlwind of notes, a joyous rush toward the finish. May's fingers flew across the keys, her body swaying with the music's momentum. The orchestra matched her energy, building toward the triumphant final chords. When the last note sounded, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the hall erupted in applause. The audience rose to their feet, applauding and cheering. Wang extended his hand to May, helping her up from the piano bench, and gestured for her to take a bow. As she looked out at the standing crowd, May caught glimpses of familiar faces, her parents in the front row, Victor and Danielle and the Luciel staff in the balcony. They were all on their feet, all smiling through tears. In that moment, the years of fear and doubt fell away. This was where she belonged, not hiding from her gift, but sharing it. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. The anxiety might never completely disappear, but she had found her way back to the music that had always been part of her soul. Later that evening, at the reception, Wang approached her with a glass of champagne and a contract. "The symphony has a few other events this season that need a soloist," he said casually. "Interested?" Before May could answer, Isabella appeared at her side. "She'll think about it," her mentor said with a smile. "But first she has a standing engagement." "Oh?" Wang looked curious. "At Le Ciel," May explained. "I still play there 3 nights a week, and will continue to do so," Isabella added. "It's important to remember where your journey restarted." May nodded, thinking of the restaurant piano where Victor had first discovered her, where she had begun to heal her relationship with music. No matter where her career took her now, she would keep that connection. "A wise decision," Wang said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings, Miss Lin, and to unexpected virtuosos." "To music," May replied simply, and they all drank to that.